You.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. This is Faye D'Souza. It's on live with Faye. This is a conversation I've been meaning to have for several days, but I was waiting because we were waiting for the central government to put forward its response before the High Court, which has now happened. So now we have something to go on. Just to give you a breakdown of what is going on. There is a case being argued in the Delhi High Court that is asking the Delhi High Court basically to criminalize marital rape. Marital rape is when a husband rapes his wife, when a husband has sex with his wife without her consent. Now, let me quickly, with the permission of our panelists, take you through why this is a conversation at all, right? So the rape laws in our country are Section 375, which fundamentally says that any penetration without consent of a woman is rape unless, and there's one exception, unless that woman happens to be legally married to the man and above the age of 15. So a wife above the age of 15 has no consent, effectively, as per the law. If her husband rapes her, it's not illegal. Now, this is what is being challenged in the Delhi High Court. There have been various arguments that have gone back and forth. Without exaggeration, there is a campaign on Twitter run by men's rights groups talking about the fact that these laws will be misused. They've also threatened to go on, I'm saying this with a straight face, they've also threatened to go on strike. So there are a group of men on Twitter who have threatened to go on strike and not get married if there is a law brought in that criminalizes marital rape. So effectively, men who want to rape their wives are saying they will not get married. I think it's a good thing, but I'm going to put a pin in that and we'll step on that later. What we're actually going to focus on today is what the union government has given as a response, because this is really what we should work with and not the voices on Twitter. Incidentally, a similar case came up back in 2017, and the government's response was nearly identical at that time as well. So we'll put it up on the screen as well. My colleague Gira will pop that up. And let me take you through some of the things that the government has said. Now, this is, it will be difficult to determine as to when the consent was withdrawn by the married woman. Most of the circumstantial and corroborative evidence will become futile in the case of marital rape. So the argument is that it will be very difficult to establish this rape at all and to establish when the woman has said no. Because we are talking about a private space of being inside your bedroom. And there is a gray area of how much the law can enter that space. Also remember, if the exception is removed, and we're talking about the Indian rape laws, it says very clearly after Nirbhaya, when our rape laws were strengthened, that the woman's statement, the survivor's statement, is enough. Right? That's the most important part. It's enough. And it would make marital rape non-bailable, as an offense. So that makes it a very strong law. The other thing that the union government has said is, and I quote, the apprehension of the respondent, which is the union government in this case, of gross misuse of the offense of marital rape by the wife cannot be ruled out. Adequate procedural safeguards will have to be ensured to be put in place, which is done by the legislator in this case, if it seeks to make marital rape an offense. So effectively, what this is saying is that women might misuse this law. And so procedural safeguards will have to be put in, and this can only be done by lawmakers, which is parliament, and shouldn't be done ad hoc by the court. Another thing that we have to quote, and this is what most people responded to, the fact that the government said, don't blindly follow the West in criminalizing marital rape. And this is, for Ira, this is on our third plate. There it is. This country has its own unique problems, factors of illiteracy, lack of financial empowerment for a majority of females. I personally don't like being referred to as females, we're women, but anyway. The mindset of society, vast diversity, poverty, etc. These have to be considered carefully before criminalizing marital rape. Again, now this is something that a lot of people responded to. And it's interesting to understand where the central government's argument is coming from. Are they saying that because a majority of the women in our country are poor, undereducated, and they have lack of financial empowerment, that it's okay to take away their rights? We don't know. So these are the main things that have come from the government in its written response. Some of the other arguments, for example, the High Court had mentioned and had noted that sex workers in India have the right to say no to a client after they have, had that conversation. Why is it that married women don't have that same right? The Delhi government had said that sections of 377, which is unnatural sex, 498A, which is domestic violence, and 326, which is causing grievous hurt, can all be used. So you don't necessarily have to write a new law or bring in marital rape per se. Marital rape is not mentioned in our law at all. Spousal rape or partner rape, these are laws that are active in the UK, they're active in the US, they're recent, fairly from the 80s, but they are active. So the question is giving women the right to say no a Western idea? And without that right, where does that leave? Yeah, so a couple of questions I want to put forward. One, fundamentally, there is the idea of asking whether or not raping your wife is legal or not. We should take a stand on that. The second part of that question is how do you implement, how do you enforce, how do you prove it to the court of law, and what that entails. And with that comes the conversation of misuse of the law, which we should also acknowledge, and we should have that conversation. I invite comments. Whoa, okay, all right. I invite comments from our audience. Do not swear. Do not use bad language. You will be blocked. But other than that, we welcome anything that you have to say. Joining me this evening to help us answer these questions, Dr. Ranjana Kumari, Director for the Center for Social Research and Chairperson for Women Power Connect, a voice greatly. Brinda, Adige, civil and human rights activist. And Mrunalini Deshmukh, who's an advocate who specializes in matrimonial and family law cases, one of the brightest in the country. So really an important voice when we're talking about family law, because a lot of the arguments that have been placed forward is that it will completely disintegrate families. And it will disintegrate the institution of marriage if men are not allowed to rape their wives. And that really is confusing for me. So we're going to ask Mrunalini Deshmukh to break that down for us as well. Let's go piece by piece. Ranjana Kumari, good evening. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Kumari.
Good evening. Thank you.
I know it sounds ridiculous to most of the younger women saying, why are we discussing this? Is rubbish. But obviously there's a need for a discussion right now. Do you think it's possible that we might find a way to bring in this law?
Well, we have been talking about it. We presented to Verma Commission. Our presentation included Justice Verma's commission accepted the recommendation from women's organization. Personally, I made that presentation also. I think it is important that we should understand three aspects of it. One, that how much right women have in marriage in terms of their own bodily autonomy and sexual control. I mean, how much can they really say yes or no, and where is the consent? Number two, which is very important to look at, is that how marriage is seen as a sacrosanct institution. It is a social contract, and we're not talking about some young, very well educated or not so educated, but women who are really able to understand what autonomy means and what empowerment means. Let's keep the women, that category of women aside for the time being, and talk about the larger society, which parliamentarians are all the time talking about, saying that, look, what will happen to India, or government of India is talking about, like, let's deal with poverty, let's deal with this, that, and the other, education. I mean, of course, you had 75 years to deal with all this, isn't it? Anyway, so that's the second question. The third one, which is much more important than that, is that, what will constitute rape? Because in terms of other issues, rape is really when you are doing the penetration without anything, but it's very broad definition now. Quantum of punishment became very, very stringent and much more, and you saw that the men who raped Nirbhaya were hanged. So let me go very quickly to all my 3 points. First of all, if marriage as a sacrosanct institution has to feel, people who are worried about, has to depend on raping the wife or doing things to wife which is not acceptable to her, or she has not given her consent for it, which is a torture, which is a torture of lifelong, which is really something that she, in sexual intercourse, she doesn't desire to do, then I would rather say that let this marriage go to hell, because this kind of a marriage is not what marriage is all about. This is not where one that is men feel entitled. Okay, the second thing is because women are given in marriage, So what happens is that men think total entitlement over their bodies. They decide about their future. They'll decide about their career, their life, everything, So there is a woman who's given in marriage, and then this woman becomes totally the property. The body also becomes a property of men. And that's how, by and large, the situation is understood. And those are the men who consider women's bodies as property, are the ones who are fearing. So we are not saying husbands are rapists. A lot of people, before I join your program, Faye, because we are saying that rape in marriage is unacceptable, it has to be made illegal and it should be criminalized. This is, we are saying from the time of even much before Verma Commission. So I think this is something which one has to understand, that it is unacceptable. The women who don't understand the consent, what is the, they have to be taught what this consent is all about and how far can you go through this kind of a sexual torture in your life. And when you should, stop it, when you can complain. Now, the other bogey which has been raised is about how do you investigate? I'm keeping the whole Western thing totally out of the window. I'm throwing it out of the window because I don't care what Western countries do, what anybody does. It's our own women who we are responsible for, and I'm talking about them only. And I come from a village, Faye. So I can, with great sense of responsibility, I can talk about my own village women. So I think what is very important is that if such women who are being raped in marriage, then certainly husband becomes rapist. And how do you prove it? Because she's talking about it. Because she is the one who, after all, in many crimes that happens within the four walls, what do? You look for circumstantial evidence. You look for evidence. You create enough safeguards. I have absolutely nothing against safeguards.
Okay, so let me just get slightly graphic here. Are you saying, so one, we will have the statement of the survivor, as we do under the rape laws. Two, you will have biological evidence that is collected of bruises, of scars, of the rape kit, the semen that is collected and things like that.
Yeah.
Can this come under the Domestic Violence Act? Does it make
No, because Domestic Violence Act recognizes all forms of violence within domestic relationship, and it does not really touch anywhere near, it doesn't go near anywhere when there is this whole sexual intercourse is concerned, because that is taken as a right of a man over women's bodies. Is his entitlement, is his controlling her sexuality. That's why she doesn't have any reproductive rights. That's why we lack women in saying that they are. So such women, if they come with the statement, please investigate it. You have to train your police people. There is a whole thing which will follow. Once we accept this idea and we illegalize rape in marriage, then certainly we have to train our people. We have to do many things. We have to create safeguards, whatever you want to do. But in rape law, look what you do. You totally accept the statement of the woman. Isn't that right? I mean, that's what the law says. I think we have a very, very good law expert on the panel. Let her come in and talk about that. But I think what is very important at this stage is that you have to go for what she's saying. You have to accept that. This is what our people are not learning to do. Whether it is police, whether it is judiciary, they question women's integrity. And here you can see the government statement. Government statements start with the assumption women will misuse it. Look at this government. This is our government. Half of the women elect these governments. And they are already starting with the assumption that women are going to misuse the law. So every law they blame women are misusing. Dowry law, they say women are misusing. So, I mean, this is no argument. This is no argument for denying the right to women to protect her sexual boundaries, to protect her bodily integrity and her sexual autonomy. I think it's absolutely no argument. And I would just say that it needs to be discussed more openly. Let government not try to stamp it in High Court itself. If people's policymakers have the courage, let's open this discussion in the country and see how many women will come forward to say, oh, I have this experience. I want something to be done about that. And how many men will come and say that this is wrong.
Okay,
you know.
let me bring in the legal expert. I understand what you're saying. Effectively, you're saying that if the argument is this will disintegrate or break down the institution of marriage, you're saying what is the need of such a marriage where one individual has no rights and no autonomy or no agency over their body? Mrunalini Deshmukh joins us right now. She's a legal expert. Ms. Deshmukh, good evening. Thank you for joining us. I remember having a conversation with a retired judge of the Supreme Court, I won't name the person, after 2017, who said, if it is not forced entry, you can't prove it at all. If it is forced entry and you're going by biological evidence of scars and bruises and broken bones, then Domestic Violence Act will do just fine. Why do you need a separate clause? What is your response to that? Ms. Deshmukh, you're on mute. I'm sorry, you have to unmute. Yes.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me and making me a part of this very, very interesting, relevant discussion that we are having, because this concerns every woman on this planet. Having said this, is the existing law sufficient, effective enough for the purposes of marital rape, or why introduce marital rape when we have this? Yes, we do have a Domestic Violence Act. Domestic Violence Act talks about what is domestic violence. Any act which causes physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal and emotional abuse. Now, what is a sexual abuse? Sexual abuse does not define rape. Sexual abuse is a very generalized word which is used in the Domestic Violence Act. Number one. Number two, more importantly, is that when
Mrunalini, can you hear me? Okay, we seem to have lost Mrunalini Deshmukh. We're going to try and come back to her in a second. Can you hear me now? No, okay. We'll come back to her in a second. Let me bring in Brinda Adige as well. Again, a voice that I choose very carefully because Brinda ji works on the ground with women who are victims of violence. Domestic violence, sexual violence of various kinds. I want to understand, Brinda Adige, what is your response to the central government's statements that these laws will largely be misused? How often, in your experience, Brinda ji, do wives complain about their husbands, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's dowry, whether it's anything else?
First and foremost, we need to understand that we are conditioned from a very small age, irrespective of religion, class, or whatever, whether I'm educated, not educated, everything, we don't talk about sex. Even today, none of my schools will introduce sex education. So the consent aspect is completely lost. Neither girls nor boys, men and women, have really reached that space where they respect or understand consent. That said, we also need to ask ourselves the myriad messaging that goes to girls and women on a daily basis, that you have to safeguard the honor of your family. Now, that honor has so many different hues. One of it is you don't come and talk about how your husband treated you inside the bedroom. That's not what you should do. Good women don't talk about it. Third, romanticizing this entire aspect of marriage and doubting the woman. In fact, you asked me this question. Out of 100 cases that we would address, 98 are suspicion. This man, the husband, suspects the woman. It just doesn't matter what her job is. Domestic help, manager, scientist, professor, teacher, this man suspects. The first thing is, are you sleeping with somebody else? Then you ask them the question, has he treated you badly? Has he done anything that you don't want him to do? And you will have all these women tell me, no, we don't talk about these things. How can I talk about what my husband does to me in the bedroom Is that not why he married me? How can I go out and tell either his mother or my own mother? So we are still talking about mother and mother-in-law. We're not even talking about anybody outside, that this man did this to me. So there is no way all these people fears that, it's going to be misused. The number of cases of marital rape that come to court would be less than 20%. Of the 20%, it would be less than 1 or 2% that we might talk about not true, not correct, or not encompassing the entirety of that complaint we are talking about. Consent is not there. How does the judiciary look at it? Look at what happened in the Franco Mulakal case. Look at how the judge addressed this issue. Started on a premise of prejudice, saying, I don't believe you. I doubt you completely. There is no evidence. You are not saying all the right things that you must say as a victim survivor. So if you can be prejudiced in all of these manners and then have these fears, which are absolutely, unwarranted, that there is a misuse, that there is, people who are going to break the family, I think we must tell them, you look at numbers. At the end of the day, don't worry about culture, don't worry about religion, don't worry about all of this. Look at statistics. What do statistics tell you? And continuously look at my soap operas and the movies and the dialogues and everyday happenings in my homes. Nobody talks about it. Consent is never a part of this marriage for this woman. That is why we need to make marital rape legal. And illegal, and say that there should be punishment. It's not going to happen immediately. It will take us another 25 years, because even now, you mentioned sexual abuse. Now, Domestic Violence Act is a remedial act. It is not a criminal act. So if my husband beats me, sexually abuses me, he doesn't get punished for it. You see, under the Domestic Violence Act, he will not get punished. When we are talking about rape, it's a crime, period, punishment. 498A is cruelty in marriage. Now, while it talks about various forms of cruelty, it also talks about sexual, but does not say anything about rape.
Also, Brinda,
we need a rape law.
Yeah.
And I'll bring in Mrunalini Deshmukh here. Sorry, we lost your connection midway. Mrunalini, you're on mute. You have to unmute. But the Domestic Violence Act has a provision for settlement between the two spouses. Once it comes before the police attempts to get them to talk about it and settle it. Now, one of the arguments that has been made in the past in 2017 as well is that if the exception of marital or spousal rape is removed from our marital laws, that option of settlement will go away because it will become a cognizable offense, which will require arrest. It's non-bailable. So taking all of these things to Mrunalini Deshmukh to ask you that question again, is the domestic violence law enough? Does it suffice? Is it necessary to bring in a marital rape law? And should we be concerned about misuse?
So to answer your question, Domestic Violence Act has certain provisions with regards to the sexual abuse. But as stated correctly by Brinda earlier, and what she said was, Domestic Violence Act is more of a civil in nature. So if there is, if a woman is able to prove that there's violence perpetrated on her, the remedy available is compensation, and compensation could be in terms of monetary things and other things. It is not penal in nature, and that's very clear. Why do we need?
Okay, so it does seem like Mrunalini Deshmukh's internet is a little weak today.
Yeah.
Do we have her back?
Yeah.
Yes, we have you back. Go ahead.
Rani, you're on mute again.
Sorry. It is then that it serves as a deterrent to the person. Now, why are we trying to say that you criminalize it? Now, does it mean that everything which has been made an offense is turned out to be a deterrent and it does not happen? But the fear, now why should men, suppose if I'm a man, why should I worry I'm going to treat my wife with respect. I'm going to love her, and I'm going to do everything by consent. Yes, marriage involves sexual relationship. It involves a healthy, robust interaction between the two sexes. But if I don't have a guilty mind, why should I make a big hullabaloo about it and say, oh, this is going to be abuse of the law and women are going to go to the courts? Having said this, Faye, let us make a very, very realistic and a very, very, how do I say, a balanced view which is there. There have been cases in the past, and I'm not talking about marital rape, about certain criminal things which were there, maybe 498 or something, where a few cases were based on false complaints and which were abusing the law. But just because a particular provision is abused by a very minority and minuscule section of the society does not mean that we cannot have a law in place for the remaining part of the women who really need that law for their protection and for their dignity. So this discussion that it will lead to misuse of law is not something that is something that I'm going to sort of, cater to their views. Number one. Number two, as far as the Domestic Violence Act is concerned, you were saying whether it is a compoundable offense or not. Now, in a Domestic Violence Act, there is a settlement that takes place, and then that becomes while something like a 498A or a marital rape could be a non-compoundable. But today, in cases where there is settlement arrived between the parties, even under 498A, Faye, you are aware that there is a provision, and the Supreme Court encourages such provisions, so that there are no criminal cases, where in cases where people have compromised, they do quash those proceedings or the FIR which has been lodged against the husband and the in-law if it is to the satisfaction of the woman. So at the end of it, whether it could be quashed, whether it could be condoned, whether it could be compromised, all those things come a little later. The most important part for bringing this particular provision and making it a criminal act is only so that women, a rape is a rape, Faye, whether rape is in the marriage or outside the marriage, it's violence on me. Now, whether it is done by third person, who gives my husband the sanction to rape me? I mean, I don't see it written in any of the law books that I've studied. So if that is not a sanction given, then why should it not be made a criminal offense is my simple question.
Ranjana, there is a question that's popping up, and we have some, I think, men's rights activists who are on the panel asking a couple of questions. One question was, why don't I have a man on the panel? Like I explained in the beginning, my three panelists are here because of their professional qualification, not because of their gender. They've worked in this area for their entire careers, which is why we have invited them. There are no men who have spent their entire careers working on women's rights, which make them experts. Okay. Point number two. There's someone who keeps asking, why are the rape laws not gender neutral? Now, this is true. The Indian rape laws are not gender neutral. They're specific to protection of women. So are the Vishaka guidelines, which protect us from sexual harassment in our workspaces. Mrunalini, you want to answer that question? Should we have gender neutral rape laws? Brinda ji, I'll come to you after this. I know that POCSO is gender neutral, which is prevention of crime of sexual nature against children, but the rape law, Mrunalini ji.
But if you see the definition of rape, as has been in the Indian Penal Code, it talks about the penetration from one person, which is the husband, in case and against the lady. And if I may be permitted to read that, so you tell me, how do I make it gender neutral? It says a man is said to commit rape. Now, do you want to say a person is said to commit rape if he or she penetrates his penis to the extent into the vagina, mouth, urethra, or anus of a woman, or makes her do so with him or any other person? How do you make this gender neutral? You can make something like a Domestic Violence Act gender neutral. There I'm with you, because there are some cases where even the men are subjected to domestic violence. The percentage may be very small. But I wonder how you can make rape laws gender neutral. I have my own doubts about it, and I don't see the logic behind a suggestion to that effect that they have made.
Okay. Yeah, I think I also. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I just want to point out that unfortunately in India right now, we don't, transgender citizens are not covered under our rape laws, and they face a lot of sexual abuse and sexual assault. That's something that needs to be taken into consideration. Same-sex rape, which sort of is now based on the writing down of 377, to some extent gets considered, but maybe it needs a law of its own. But Ranjana, Kumari, go ahead.
No, I think it's important to understand that I think very nicely Mrunalini has explained that, rape and sexual assault by its definition is men doing it against women. It's very, very clearly, mentioned. And I think other genders and the issues can be discussed, can be brought in. We are not saying it's not acceptable for us. But at the moment, what we are discussing is rape in marriage. And this is a relationship between a man and a woman in marriage, because marriage is a social institution. As I already said, it's a social contract between not only just two people, but two families, and there are many, many informal, traditional rules and regulations about it. And there are, of course, legal provisions for it also. So there are both sides of the whole is protected from everything. But what is important is to see that in this relationship, here is this woman who absolutely, whose consent, first of all, she doesn't have the, the autonomy and the consent. And on the other side, somebody who's entitled and who's aggressor, who's really violating her and doing all sorts of things without her consent. So who should be protected here? I mean, I just want to ask we are not against men. We are not against saying that, society is full of these rapists in families and in marriages. But we are saying if it happens, it needs to provide protection to women, the women who are really facing it. So why are you unnecessarily bringing this issue of, why it is against men? It is not against, it is against rapists. And we are not saying men are rapists. We are not saying husbands are rapists. We are saying that what is happening at the moment in society is a lot of women, very, very young children are still getting married. Look, pandemic has really pushed child marriage. A lot of people. And I also find it very strange when you keep 18 as age for marriage so far. Now they're going to extend it to 21. Then why do you have to say only till 16? I mean, I don't understand all these, contradictions in our law itself. That, you're talking about 16-year-old, if you do anything which is unnatural, abnormal, or whatever, so she needs the protection. Why 18-year-old not needs protection? Why 40-year doesn't need protection? Same thing. So sexual assault that's what I want to appeal to all the policymakers. Look, sexual assault is sexual assault. Nobody is talking about normal family relationship where husband, wife take care of each other and they take each other's consent and everything goes on with mutuality of respect and dignity and, and the protection of interest of each other. We are talking about people who are violating it, who are taking advantage of it. We are talking about people who are marrying young kids, 13, 14, 15, 16, and doing anything and everything that they would want to do with her body. So it's extremely unacceptable for any society, and much more so for Indian society. Look, you talk about women, on a highest pedestal, and look at what is happening to our young kids, girls, small girls getting into these marriage relationship, not knowing what her consent is all about, and then getting abused. Should anybody allow that? Should any society allow that?
Ranjana ji, I have a quick question for you. We were also having this conversation about the marital age of women across the board being brought up to 21 from the 18 that it is right now. Incidentally, though, our rape laws say the exception is provided the wife is below the age of 15, which means
Yes.
a 16-year-old wife you can rape, a 17-year-old wife you can rape, an 18-year-old wife you can rape. How are these two laws not reconciling with each other?
Well, it's totally wrong. It's totally contradictory. It's totally going against each other. When you say 15, I'm saying 16, actually it is 15. So, it's totally wrong. It needs to be, all this needs to be corrected. And when we are going to bring in, and look what the court, I just want to point out in court, what is being argued is just removing the exception. If you want a 15-year to get raped night after night after night, and she has no agency to say no, she can't walk out of that marriage because sacrosanct is lifelong relationship. You've got to be, living the hell in that marriage, and, marriage and the hell very close to each other in many ways. So I think it's important to understand that she is the one who's very young, and we are trying to protect, and everybody for that matter. How can a 60-year-old be abused and you say no, because she's 60, she can go through everything. What is this logic? What is this mindset that we are suffering from? So it's better to, first of all, this age contradiction, age confusion has to be removed. And secondly, that everybody should be covered under criminalizing the marital rape law. And it's just that exception, if you remove, everything is okay with the law. You don't have to go to create a new law, or you don't have to create anything new. Rape has its punishment. Rape has been defined. Sexual assault is totally very clear in every law book. So nothing, just that why did you put the exception? I think Justice Verma had that apprehension. In one NDTV interview, he said that I know that our parliament will not accept such a position. And they did not. And even now they are discussing it, and they're trying to bring in all kinds of issues, which I think is very illogical. I'm sure High Court will notice that, and trying to kind of do away with the proper in-depth discussion on this issue.
Well, there's someone called Sachin Jain who's saying that we're making a mockery out of this debate because we don't understand the law. Sachin Jain, we're referring to the law under section 375 of the Indian Penal Code, which is the rape law in India, which has an exception saying unless the woman is legally married and below the age of 15. Take a look at it. Section 375 under the Indian Penal Code. Brinda Adige wanted to come in. I just want to bring in one more thing, Brinda ji. The government has also said that it wants consensus of various parties before it moves forward on this. And these are the people the government is currently consulting. Chief ministers of all the states, chief justices of all the high courts, law universities, bar councils of all the high courts and the Supreme Court, and members of parliament of both houses. Do you see this as a good thing that the government is taking on so many voices and so many opinions?
Well, all of these people constitute less than 15%. Why are they not talking to the citizens? The law is for the citizens. Why would they not want to talk to the citizens? Why would they not want to talk to women? If it is going to be a law that is going to be a robust law that would do justice to all parties, I think the government must make this exercise as deepening, as wide as possible. Just asking academicians, law universities, chief ministers is not enough. They are policy makers, yes, but the law is going to be utilized by the people. So when are you going to come to the women? Because at the end of the day, the women are the ones who would probably be making a complaint at the courts, the police station. So it is important that they have this exercise in whichever way, in whichever manner. They don't have to make excuses that, so many women are illiterate, so many women don't know. Sorry, you make me understand the law. There are a lot of people who can facilitate these discussions. And only after such a consultation with the public should you go ahead to say whatever you want to say. Because we know what our policymakers have been talking all along, whether it is chief ministers or it is also the people who sit and write up the policies. It is patriarchal.
How will, if you went out and asked the general public, how would that opinion be different? Wouldn't it be a reflection of the patriarchy that you're talking about?
No. Yes, it would.
No. We are saying, one moment. We are saying that everybody is not in that patriarchal setup. Everybody is not going to be talking the same language. We are also talking about women activists. We are talking about social workers. We're talking about ordinary citizens. Now, all of them don't think patriarchy. They may speak patriarchy because that is what a good woman must do. But go further, go deeper. Like I mentioned to you, Faye, when we start asking the question, what else? How else did he do, harass you? What else did he do? How did he violate you? And very slowly, these women will come and say, he got angry. The days he's angry with me, he has rough sex with me. There's nothing I can do about it. So talk to these women. Is it okay? Do they don't mind that husband having rough sex with them? Talk to these women and they will tell you, no, we don't want it. And those are the voices also the government must listen to. The government can't say we will listen only to the so-called intelligentsia and academicians and the policymakers and chief ministers. Listen to us. We are also 1 billion point 2 free.
Well, I think I here agree, Brinda, that men have made laws for women way too long. Let women make laws for themselves.
Absolutely.
Let the society understand that women now understand all this. They know, they have a voice. We have been studying, we have been researching, we have been, going through all the documents, especially about this when we presented to Verma Commission. We had studied everywhere, wherever they had the rape laws and how they prove it, what kind of evidence they collect. So I think it's not that, women will not be able to. So please let women get involved in making the laws about themselves. I mean, look at the chief minister. How many chief minister women do you have in this country? How many percent of 7% of women representing in state assemblies, 8% maximum? And parliament has only 14%, and that is true in Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha. So please, let's not, this is what government is going wrong. I mean, government is really not considering the constituencies that matter. Women who matter, women whose life is affected by all this. They must be consulted also. So I totally agree with Brinda that you do have to consult a wider constituency and have a deeper debate. We are not fearful of any debate.
Absolutely.
Mrunalini?
Yeah, Faye, my suggestion is, why this government, it is so sensitive about this topic that they want to talk to the chief ministers, the chief justice. What is so different about this? You did not do that when the Domestic Violence Act was there. You did not do it when you introduced the 498A. You saw the statistics, you saw the things which were there, and you felt the need. Good job. You should have done that. You did it much later, but you have done that. Now, why when it comes to a marital rape, the whole society is awakened to say that, oh my God, the institution of marriage will come to an end. It's an onslaught on the institution of marriage. The women are there'll be a long queue outside the police stations every day. My husband raped me, my husband raped me, my husband raped me. And this is all going to create a chaotic situation in our country. And today, the men will be sort of crucified by the women at the end of the day, every single day. There are certain WhatsApp going on. Next time I'm going to have sex with my wife, I'm going to ask her to write, do you consent? This is the date and this is the time. Now, these are the people who are making mockery of marital rape.
Exactly.
Tell the gentleman who has said on our chat box that you are making, these are the ones who are making mockery of it, that please, I'm going to ask my wife that I have my consent for the rape, and we can have rape for we can have sex for 1 hour, and so on and so forth. Now, don't trivialize it to such an extent. Please understand the sensitivity and what the woman goes through. Please do not ignore these points, because we still think from a patriarchal mindset that the woman is a property of the man and he can deal with it the way he wants. Wake up, guys. Wake up, smell the coffee. Times have changed. If US and UK can have it, we are not aping the West. Whatever is good and whatever is just and fair, we should always learn. We are too late in the day to bring this about. Many of my sisters and many of my friends and many of my people in the past have suffered in silence. Now we can't let this generation and the next generation do that. The government has to stand up to this. You can put whatever checks and balances you need to do. You want to ensure that there is no abuse? Of course, you must ensure. You're the government. You have to take a very neutral stand. Do that. Put all the checks and balances which are required. But to say because women are going to misuse it and because the institution of marriage is going to collapse like a pack of cards, this is no answer. This is what I feel about it.
Absolutely.
One more argument, and Brinda ji, I'll come to you immediately after this. Mrunalini ji, one more argument is that if marital rape is made illegal, which makes it, like I said, non-bailable, cognizable offense, the man gets arrested and is in jail, awaiting trial, that the family is now destitute. The children are now destitute. The family is broken up. What is your response to that?
No, so this is what was the argument that was done at the time of the triple talaq also, if you remember, that if a man is found guilty of instant triple talaq, then then what happens to his... Now, this is a difficulty, Faye, to be very honest with you, we face in otherwise. Now, there is a maintenance order and the husband has not complied with the maintenance order. So there are 1 or 2 or 3 processes that happen, and if he doesn't do, then he's arrested and kept behind bars. Now, the argument that this woman has is, if my husband, who's a daily worker, is kept behind bars for 3 days or 4 days, what am I and my children supposed to eat? So it is a genuine, I see it in court. I see it in court on a very regular basis. So we have to strike a balance between what it should be. The idea is not to put him behind the bars. The idea is to serve as a deterrent. You could also be asked to monetarily compensate. You could also be asked to undergo any of these things. For example, that if as an offense that it is committed, can even be asked if he comes from a little middle class family, a part of his asset to be transferred in the name of the wife. Some kind of things should be done which will strengthen the women to be able to survive with dignity. The bottom line everybody is missing is, why can a wife not lead a life of dignity in a marriage? And we're not talking about all wives. We're talking about wives who are trapped in these kind of relationships where men become beasts and where men use women as his pleasure in a very ravenous manner. That's what I feel.
Yeah. And also,
Ranjana point out that we have to realize that we live in two Indias, right? So there's the India that the four of us are having this conversation in, that has access to education. We know what our rights are. We have access to legal remedy. All of us have Mrunalini Deshmukh's phone number if we need it. There is the other India, where a survivor of rape is offered the option of marrying her rapist as a solution to the problem, where rape is seen as a matter of honor more than physical and mental abuse. In a country where women are told, if you have a problem, if you've been raped, why don't you just marry your rapist and the problem goes away? And this person, this individual now has to foresee the rest of her life locked in a house with the person who oppresses her, losing agency over her body and her mind on a daily basis. I mean, the physical abuse, not even to mention the mental abuse that will go on with it. And we must be very clear here. There seems to be a misunderstanding about the fact that we're talking about women who will turn around and say, no, I have a headache today, I don't feel like it. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about brutal assault. We're talking about the types of sex that women don't find comfortable. We're talking about using sex as punishment. We're talking about using sex as oppression, to oppress a woman, to punish her, to constantly beat out of her any idea that she might have a voice of her own. And that happens in really abusive relationships. We seem to be misunderstanding that all our relationships are abusive relationships, that the institution of marriage is in some way based on the continuation of abuse. But Ranjana, coming back to that problem of how do we address that India? How do we explain to the multitude of families, men and women together, that this is not okay?
Yes, Faye, you're so right. Precisely is protecting those girls, those women who are totally voiceless. We're talking a lot about empowering them with all kinds of economic programs, this, that, and the other. But look, they are totally powerless. They have absolutely no way to walk out of that marriage. They have absolutely no way to protest against that abuse. They get tortured and they live that torture all their life. Now, men who give this kind of judgments sitting in the courts saying that you marry your abuser, your rapist, are the men who consider women as object of sexual pleasure. And that's where the whole mindset is. I don't think majority of society and people who are sitting in policy making in parliament side, I hope not that they consider women as just object of sexual pleasure. Well, I may want to believe otherwise, but I am just appealing to their conscience that, look, this is for majority of Indian women and girls who are marrying young, who are marrying whatever age, but they are into these abusive relationships. They have absolutely no way to come out. If you give them something to empower them, then these are the real empowerments. When sexual harassment law was getting passed in Me Too movement, everybody said, all the offices will be rocked, women will never be employed, every woman will be standing and complaining against their bosses and the people, the men they work with. What is this? If women are facing some kind of an injustice and they want to raise their voices against that and they want protection in terms of legal arrangement, you have to provide that. Majority of Indian society is rural society. And they all come through the vote coming from, the same women sitting in these villages who are being abused and who have been misused, whose lives have been miserable in marriages. But so when it comes to giving them some protection, you have to think as policymakers, sitting in parliament, sitting in state assemblies, wherever you are, you have to think and think about that larger India, the real India, the bigger India. Of course, we all are part of from that real India, but I think that's the whole thing. And that is why we need this law. We need the law. And I don't think Any law that you made to protect women has been, barring 1 or 2%, I don't know, has been abused.
I want to ask this question of the entire panel. It's an extremely unpopular question, but when I was having some conversations with the people around me, this came up saying, hey, if I'm afraid of a false sexual harassment case in the workplace, I've put cameras all over my office. And so all my work conversations are recorded. And so there's nothing that can be falsely accused of me. I've taken measures. How do I take those measures in my bedroom with my wife? I mean, yes, there seems to be a string of mistrust here in the basis of this relationship. But let's address that. Let's address the idea of consent between husband and wife behind closed doors. How does one prove consent in this case? Ranjana, if you want to start, because you said you've looked at how other countries do this. How do you prove consent in marital rape?
As you very rightly in the beginning itself said that, you have to look at the what happens to the women's body when she's coming to, and we have seen it. I mean, I've seen someone who cried and I kind of almost scolded her and told her, get out of my room, because I don't see any problem. What is the problem? And when she really showed me, I can never forgive myself for that, the way I really treated her on that particular day when we were counseling her. So I think that this is the whole thing, that, so one thing is that a woman will not come out normally to talk about it. It'll take centuries when they have that kind of empowerment and they are coming forward. But if they come out, you have to trust them and believe them. So that's number one, that if she's complaining, there is something there. Secondly, that also the physical and other evidence are there. Normally, sometimes, in family, they talk about it and they want to run away from that marriage. They want to break that marriage. I've also met such young girls from villages who will just, not go back, because they will be so much abused that they will just not know what to do. And also in absence of sex education, so many people are learning to do so many, learning from the market and learning from all kinds of, porn sites and all kinds of things. And young boys in the villages and the girls, I mean, they're really getting into this really messy relationships in marriage. So it's important to understand no woman will come and start complaining about it, because for women, that burden of izzat, or is so heavy on her that she won't do it. And if she does it, please trust and then investigate with all kinds of circumstantial evidence, all kinds of, history in marriage relationship, whatever has happened, and also some kind of, evidence from the others, which you get, and also her own physical evidence. So 4 ways you can establish it.
So to counter that, Mrunalini Deshmukh, the government's response to the Delhi High Court says it is difficult to determine when consent is withdrawn by a married woman. Most circumstantial and corroborative evidence becomes futile in the case of marital rape. How do you then prove that? If this is the official's written response of the union government.
Which is true, because this is the practical difficulty. Now, for any criminal offense, it has to be proved beyond reasonable doubt. That is what the parameter that is utilized. But in cases like this, there cannot be any eyewitnesses, there cannot be any other evidences which are required, which are typically in a normal situation, which are there. So like Ranjana ji said, and this is exactly what I was going to say, is the circumstances which are surrounding, including the history of the relationship and what has happened in the past, will be only a corroborative thing, and all of that together will be able to establish. Absolutely difficult for a woman if there is one solitary act of marital rape on her. It is going to be extremely difficult even for the guy to prove that there was a consent, or even for the woman to do that. But if it is, again, as I said, it's a concept which is evolving. Faye, we are absolutely, till today, it's really a gray area. If you ask me, it's a concept which is evolving. We will have to come around with certain factors that could be constituted to be a marital rape in the absence. And if the evidence and the burden is going to be on the woman to prove that she was raped, then obviously we need to strengthen her hands with other certain factors which are around. But to be very, very honest, I think the concern which has been raised by the government, though we know it is one of the reasons to do away with and not have the law, but that is something that needs to be addressed, as all of us are thinkers here, social, political thinkers, to understand that how do we combat this so that it becomes an extremely fair law in favor of both the husband and the wife.
But Mrunalini ji, just one thing from my side. I just 1 second. I just want to say that in rape, the evidence is the statement of the girl. Isn't that right? So it becomes so that's the evidence. And also the whole idea that there has to be eyewitnesses and all that is not been acceptable in the cases of sexual assault and rape. So I think so we are talking about sexual assault and rape. So similar guidelines will have to be given in terms of investigation there also. So that's why we are not wanting to change the sexual assault law, but just remove the exception.
But Ranjana ji, in cases where there is no hurt, there is no injury, but there is forceful intercourse by the man on the woman against her wishes, and there are no bodily injuries or there's no hurt at all, except the pain which she feels within herself. Like we are all women, we understand that. So it becomes difficult in such cases, because when there is suppose there is bleeding, where there is hurt, there is a bruise, and there are several things. In a way, it becomes easier to prove it, because these are all these manifestations of that. In cases where these are not there, but still there is a forcible penetration by the husband, then under such cases, it is very difficult to prove, is what I was trying to, decipher from the
Brinda, Adige wants to come in. Go ahead, Brinda.
I think it is also time now for the courts to start working alongside with counselors, psychologists, and psychiatrists. We know that today, when women go and speak, they talk about all of these things. And we know that there are professionals, there are licensed counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists. And it is important for the court to look at this aspect from that angle also. So everything cannot be forensic evidence that I can touch and feel and see. Much of it would also be, what have I told my counselor? What does my counselor think? Often there are tools that are given, some questionnaires are given, and it is not difficult to find out what is coming out of that pain, of that trauma, all of that is there, which can be established. And I think it is important, and we don't just say that, the judge is the final person who will believe and not believe. Like the laws have told us, her testimony is final. Yes. But if there is an iota of doubt, if there is some kind of a concern, then use professionals. That's what professionals are there for. And let's also remember, in any way, we don't have an ideal rape victim survivor. In marital rape, it's even worse. If ever a judge or a prosecutor or the defense lawyer asks, did you scream? This woman will never shout and scream. Her children are there, probably her parents are there. I don't know, there are so many people in that house. She will not shout, she will not scream. She's not going to make all that drama of, saying that this man has done this to me. No, she's going to suffer it silently. And that is why it's important that we bring in all of these other professionals so that marital rape can be established and justice being extended. Now, somebody said, oh, the family will break. Do you know the number of cases where we are on a daily basis where husbands abscond, desert? Families are going on. And maintenance is not paid by these fellows. Even though we find them walking everywhere, the police can't find them. The police will come to the court and say they are absconding. They're not there. But we will find them. So saying that the family's breadwinner is gone, not there, I think these are all excuses. We want to study further and ask, what is the reality? When you look at it really, you won't want a marriage where this husband tortures and traumatizes this woman, this wife sexually, because he knows he will never get caught or punished.
We have a question from Pranab Ganguly, who says that, do we need a more robust helpline number for victims? Can we incentivize homemakers with economic dynamics to play a crucial role? But I fundamentally want to ask this question. There are two different aspects before us right now, which is what I said at the beginning. One is, as a country, do we believe that a man raping his wife is legal or illegal? That's the question to answer. The second question to answer is, Do we want that law? How do you want to enforce that law? How do you want to prove that law? How do you want to train your cops? How do you want to collect the forensic evidence and all of that other thing? There are two separate issues we have to answer. One is a society and a country, and the other, obviously, with all of your legal prowess and all the professionals who can help you answer and write a watertight law. I also want to remind our audience that the Constitution and our law is a living, breathing thing. It is meant to improve. It is meant to constantly learn. It is meant to constantly be improved. And the argument of misuse has been brought about on the Vishaka Guidelines, on the SC/ST Atrocities Act, on POCSO, on UAPA. All laws run the risk of misuse. It is up to the lawmakers to write better and better laws and to improve the laws as they stand so that misuse can keep coming down. But the first question, I want to bring this back to our panelists one by one. One is to address what Pranab has asked us about more helplines, more economic access for women. Will that make a difference? And two, is it important for us right now to just answer this question of whether or not we believe this is wrong, and then hand it over to our lawmakers to write adequate laws as they see fit? Ranjana ji.
Yes, I think, Faye, you brought out a very, very important piece of legislation, SC/ST Act. When somebody really abuses a scheduled caste person and says, as it is called, Jati Suchak, just to say that that kind of a language, then the person can go and file a complaint. The abuser has to be arrested under that law, and also, of course, investigation follows. So how do you do that? I mean, has somebody heard that? Do you think somebody really was sitting in that place when this happens? Many times it doesn't. Many times that when people go and complain, but they complain with responsibility. If something like that has happened, there are some chances of, going against the normal parameters of the law, but certainly when this happens. So there are laws in the country already which really have made those provisions where you can understand and you can, law will have to take cognizance of that particular thing that happened. So when it comes to women, then we start, looking for consensus of everybody. We will start looking for, what will happen to the society, the marriage. When it comes to women, then all these questions are raised. So why? Why? Because there is absolutely no conviction to give women empowerment. There is no conviction to protect women and also to see that we are only saying that make it an exception and then let women come forward. And you will see how many women really will. I mean, as Brinda described it, lines of women are standing in front of the Thana and saying that I've been raped. I mean, what are these people thinking about, Indian women or any women for that matter? So I think it's just that. And to answer your first question is that, look, I mean, unless, of course, economic empowerment and, all those things we are working on, and everybody, we have to see that women are standing on their own feet. A lot of these things will be absolutely, become redundant. When women have their own, they can provide support to themselves and children, they will not like to live in hell. A lot of Indian women are living in the name of marriage because of economic subordination and economic difficulties that they will face living in these kind of situations. And all of us who work with women in the community know that. So I think it's important to understand that that's very important. Nobody's denying all that. Of course, we need that. At first thing, in principle, your first question, in principle, do we understand rape in marriage? Do we want to accept it as illegal act? And do we want to make it punishable offense? That's most important thing. So far, I don't see any, the way they are doing dilly-dallying, all same things, And you couldn't pass women reservation bill with the same thing. You just same thing, consensus. What will happen? What will people do? Our political parties, what will, you don't want to recognize that half of the population is suffering in this country and a lot needs to be done about them.
Also to our audience members who are saying that, women will just go file complaints about rape just to harass their husbands. Do you know what happens to women who file complaints about rape?
Yeah.
They're sent to hospitals for checkups, government hospitals. The checkup is done in most of the cases in the most insensitive way. Their entire body becomes evidence that is, again, no longer theirs. Their consent is taken away from them. They're photographed. Their evidence is collected. And the trial goes on for years and years and years and years. No woman wants to put herself through that. Let me point out to you very clearly. You need a lot of support of your family, of financial support, legal support, medical support, to be able to simply make that complaint. It is not something that any woman in any strata of society will do easily, lightly. Brinda, go ahead. Closing statements.
Yes, somebody asked about a helpline. Very important to have a robust helpline, a helpline where the person believes the woman. Today, we have most of the helplines sitting with the government agencies, and the kind of support that is expected by the person calling, they don't get it. And so it is important for us to be able to extend that support immediately, because that woman is calling you out of distress and crisis. And like Faye, you mentioned over here, even if the law comes tomorrow, I will bet you, write and give you, you're not going to get people coming there and making a complaint. The first question this woman is going to ask is, what will my children think about me? What will my family think about me? Will I continue to have that respect? Am I a good woman? We are talking of this large number. You will have a very small number that might come and make the complaint, and then a minuscule number that will actually be not true or whatever. So let's remember that we want to tell women, before that, we want to tell our girls and boys, respect, dignity, don't objectify, don't accept all the jokes that go around on your WhatsApp and wherever that it is coming, saying that, women are like this, women are like that. No, you are romanticizing, fantasizing, and you want this woman to be a Devi and an Apsara at the same time. You don't want her to be a woman. She will never be called by her name. She only has to perform her roles. And that's exactly what today's argument, today's debate is. Give that space to that woman. And if you don't give, you will be telling all those lies. It will be misused. There will be lines of people coming there. You know that it is not like that. So there's no point in telling lies. And those group of people who said that we will go onto the streets and we will not get married if such a law comes. What would you want to say if you got to know that? You go speak to your family members, ask them. I don't know how really they will come out and say. If one of your family members says, yes, I was treated in this manner by your father, by your brother, by my husband, what would you want to say to them?
I just want to point out the thing that was interesting for me when this whole marital rape argument popped up again, especially reading Twitter now, is that we realize that the act of sex between husband and wife or otherwise is not just about consent. It's about active participation from both partners. It's about the giving and the receiving of pleasure for both partners. We unfortunately have not understood consent.
Yeah.
Forget about active participation. Forget about giving and receiving pleasure. Forget about the person being comfortable with everything that is being done and enjoying everything that is being done, which is sex. It's a two-way street. We've not understood consent. We've not gone past consent. A large number of people still seem to find consent extremely problematic in our country. And maybe that's where we need to start. The idea of female pleasure, and that sex has to be pleasurable for women. It's something that they should voluntarily opt for, that they should enjoy and want to participate in, is something that's completely alien to us as a society. And a lot of the misunderstanding of sex and consent comes from the fact that we don't believe that women should enjoy sex. We believe that it is a commodity that gets traded and handed over to the husband whenever that does happen. And maybe a lot of our problems are stemming from there. I do appreciate our panelists giving us time this evening to have this conversation, and I hope we can continue to talk about it. Again, none of us hate men. I have a lot of wonderful men in my life who I love dearly. I want to just clarify that for the audience. Our aim is to continue to talk about it, to understand it, to kick the tires, and to be able to answer questions. Do leave us your suggestions. Yes, sex education is important, and that's a conversation I remember having with Brinda, Adige, where most schools and parents of schools turn around and say, we don't want our children talking about this kind of stuff because it's morally wrong. There are so many challenges in our country. At some point, I do feel that we need to tell all the girls of our country that it's not okay for someone to rape you, even if that person is your husband. And maybe that message needs to come from the courts. And that's actually the question that we're trying to answer tonight. Thank you, all of you, for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Faye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.